We're all in this together. You're watching Social Distance Learning by ISBA. Get the kids together. Learn something new. Ask a few questions. And engage.
Hussain. I'm the co-founder and director of the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona. You're watching Social Distance Learning from ISBA. This is a program that we've tried to bring to you during our social isolation in our homes. So hopefully it's been something you've enjoyed. I just want to make sure that you know that all of the slides I'm going to be using today um, are copyrighted to our affiliate in California, Islamic Networks Group. So if you are recording or if you're going to take screenshots of these slides to use them, please make sure that you only use them for personal use and not for public use. You will have to get their permission. One more thing I want to mention is if we have any students, high school or middle school students watching, your teachers have asked that we take attendance. So you're going to see an attendance um, bar up there in the corner. Once that comes up, I'd like to invite students to please type the word here, HERE, in the comments, either on YouTube or on Facebook, wherever you're watching us. That way your teacher is able to take attendance to make sure that you have, in fact, been watching this program. Also, please note that it's not going to come up just one time. It's going to come up a couple of times through the program so that you'll have to check in frequently. During this program, we welcome your questions, we welcome your comments. If you are able to, please give us your questions or your comments in the comment section below, and I will do my best to respond to you. Um, and you don't have to wait till the end. You're welcome to do this throughout the presentation. And also, obviously, ISBA being a nonprofit, we are open to your kind contributions and donations, financial, donations throughout for our programs. So thank you so much. Now, our topic today is Salat, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. Could I get a slide, please? Muslims are taught their religion in 3 dimensions. One is in terms of beliefs, next is practices, and the last is what we're supposed to do with those beliefs and practices. So the 5 practices in Islam are referred to as the 5 pillars of Islam. And so Salat, which happens to be the 5 daily prayer, are part of those 5 pillars. The Arabic word is Salat, and if you'll notice the ones before is a profession of faith, followed by a required donation, also fasting during the month of Ramadan, and a pilgrimage to Hajj. The section I'm going to talk about today is mostly just our daily prayer. Next slide, please. Muslims throughout the world, at the age of about 7 or so, maybe a little earlier, depending on your family, are taught how to pray, conduct these very physical, formal prayers. And these are, obviously, we have 2 different ways that we pray. We have a personal prayer, which is conducted in any language I speak, any time of day, all day long, never at all. That's just me speaking to um, my creator. But these formal 5 daily prayers are conducted completely in Arabic, with using portions of the Quran, the Muslim holy book that we've memorized from a very young age in portions. Some of the portions that we use are very standard, everybody does the same, and then others we choose. They're optional in terms of which ones we pick. And again, parts of the Quran. And I will go through those in a little bit of detail with you so you get to understand what we're doing. Now, the slide you see here, if you look at the pictures, you see the gentleman standing there on a prayer rug, and during his prayer, first when he's standing, he stands taking a position that's very respectful. He's not standing with an arrogant pose. Um, because for Muslims, we feel that 5 times a day we have an appointment where we speak to God. We stand in front of Him. So we stand with this idea that we are humble in front of our Creator. During the prayer, you'll notice that we bow. And then followed by that, we actually prostrate and touch our forehead to the ground. Now, these actions, these three actions are repeated 2, 3, or 4 times in any given prayer, depending on which prayer it is. So Muslims are required from the age of about 10 onwards until the day we die to conduct these 5 daily prayers. The first would be before sunrise. The second is at noon. The third is in the afternoon. The next is at sunset, or just as the sun goes down. It's after it's just gone below the horizon. And then the last one at bedtime, at nighttime. Now, again, like I said, depending on which prayer it is, it depends, that's how long it's going to be, how many repetitions you're going to get. You'll notice he's standing on a prayer rug. Prayer rugs are not holy, they're not untouchable, they're not anything significant. All it is a medium to keep me clean while I pray, because I can pray anywhere I am. I can pray in my home, I can pray at the mosque, which is a place of worship for Muslims. I can pray out in the park, I can pray outside my office. I can pray just about anywhere. And just to make sure that since I'm putting my head all the way down to the ground, that my head touches a clean space, I'm going to use some form of a barrier between me and the ground. Usually they're prayer rugs. Sometimes it could be a piece of paper. If you have somebody had nothing else. I've seen people in travel, if they've forgotten their prayer rug, will use a towel. So it's again just something to keep dust and dirt off of our clothing and our face, not anything holy. Things to keep in mind if you come across somebody praying, conducting a formal prayer like this, you would try to avoid walking in front of them. It's just disrespectful. If one has to walk in front of them, if they happen to be in a place that's, where somebody needs to go in front of them, walk about 10, 15 feet far ahead and then cross over. That way you're not disturbing their prayer. That would be nice. Now, what do Muslims actually say during this prayer? They actually begin by raising their hands up close to their ears, and they say the phrase Allahu Akbar. Now, you have probably heard this many times in many different iterations, in different contexts, but Allahu Akbar is what most of us use as a praise to God, which means God is the greatest, God is great, God is the most great, basically, um, uh, you know, basically saying the glorifying him, basically. And that's how we begin our prayer. And immediately after that, we will either fold our hands in front of us on our chest or a little lower, again as a sign of respect, or we'll keep our hands down by our sides, depending on how one was taught growing up. During that time, Muslims will recite, and this is all Muslims who are conducting this prayer, will recite the opening prayer in the Quran, known as Surah Fatiha. It is 5 verses long, 5 lines long. It is very, very similar, and the meaning it has is during this recitation of the Quran, the opening basically glorifies God. It asks for forgiveness, thanks God, and also then asks for guidance. And that's all that's being done at that point. Once a person has recited the opening prayer, at that point they will go ahead and recite any other passage from the Quran that they've memorized, whichever one talks to their heart, whichever talks to them. And then they go into this bowing position that you can see in the second slide, referred to as ruku. And while they are in ruku, they're only there for a few seconds, and there they again glorify God. Um, um, with a remembrance repeated about 3 times. After that, they go down into prostration and they glorify God again, while with their head, touching the ground. They sit back up and then they repeat that prostration. And then they go back up. So you'll see that throughout this, it is conducted completely in Arabic, again, using passages from the Quran that we have memorized. And people choose whichever passages from the Quran they prefer. Some people memorize many passages, so they have a lot of the Quran that they can choose from. Some only memorize some of the very short chapters of the Quran, and those are the only ones they have a preference for them anyway, and they use those. Now, during this prayer, um, there are, sometimes we have limitations, right? Sometimes we have a leg injury, or people are very, very old and frail, are unable to go up and down quite as fast. If they're not conducting this prayer in congregation, they can actually do it at their own pace. But if they are, in fact, keeping up with the congregation, they may choose to sit in a chair. So they will go through as much of the motions as they can while sitting in a chair, and thereby, being a little bit kinder to their knees and their body going up and down. The same applies to people, women who are pregnant, who are unable to bow quite so far down during pregnancy. Um, so adjustments can be made, to allow for that. And so it doesn't always have to be standing and prostrating. One does as much as one physically is able to do. Now, you'll also note that this person is facing in a certain direction. Obviously, you can't tell that by the picture, but when Muslims conduct this prayer, from all around the world, they're going to face towards Makkah. Makkah is a city in western Saudi Arabia where Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad's tribe came from. That's where he was born. And although initially Muslims used to pray facing towards what is called their first Qibla, which was Jerusalem. During his lifetime, the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was asked to change the direction to Makkah. And so Muslims from around the world during this prayer will all stand facing towards Makkah. So from America, we normally take a northeasterly direction to pray. Northeasterly just because the earth itself is it's a kind of ellipse. It's not a complete circle. It's not a sphere. And so the distance between us and Makkah is shorter going via the North Pole. So what we do is we go northeasterly. Otherwise, we could go easterly as well. But if one is in India, one would face towards the west. If one is in, say, South Africa, one would face kind of northeasterly. So depending on where one is in the world, one would face in that direction. So it's not always northeast, it's northeast because I happen to be in North America. Having said that, when Muslims pray in congregation, um, we stand shoulder to shoulder. There are no chairs except the few that are used by people who, again, have physical limitations for the prayer. Otherwise, people will stand together shoulder to shoulder in rows, lining up in front of each other, and they bow in the same direction, and then they touch their heads down in the same direction. When we pray in congregation as a big group like this, men and women are separated. The separation, the way they're separated just depends on the culture of the society you're in. It depends on the limitation of the real estate that you had. If you, it depends on what design people chose to follow. For example, we have several mosques in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and each one of them has men and women separated during prayer, but in different ways. One of them has men in the front and women in the back, and a curtain that goes down the middle. It's actually a pretty fine curtain, but it is a curtain that goes down the middle. Another one has men in the front, women in the back with about a 15-20 foot space. There's no curtain. Another one has men in one room and women in a completely different room. And that was just because the community kind of grew really fast and they had to come up with another space and they started using another space, a completely different space. Another one has men downstairs on the main floor and women on a floor on a mezzanine style half floor upstairs with a glass window that looks in down below. So every one of them has a different way. Actually, another mosque in Phoenix has men and women almost side by side, facing and bowing in the same direction. And there is no barrier there. It's just, I think the congregation is small enough that nobody gets close enough to pray that way. But these are all a function of design, what was, accepted by the culture of the people attending that mosque. But in general, men and women are separated in some form of the other while conducting this formal prayer. It is a very physical prayer. And so the separation has nothing to do with one being superior or better than the other or the prayer being different. All it is to avoid distraction. Because when we bow down, like, the gentleman is doing in that picture, you will find sometimes one's clothes move in directions that one would have hoped they hadn't. And so just to make the person behind you comfortable and the person and yourself comfortable, staying with people of the same sex just makes it a little easier and less distracting. There is no other reason for this other than that. May I get the next slide, please? Now, in this slide, you will notice there are pictures of two different mosques or places of worship, like a church or a temple. One of them is in Ohio, the other was in DC. Not all mosques look like this. If you go to the mosque in Scottsdale, Arizona, it has a very Spanish colonial kind of architecture. If you go to some mosques, they look like any churches that you would see. So the architecture of the mosque, again, depends on who built it, where they built it, where they live. So every country has a different look for their mosque. Every culture has a different look for their mosques. Many have domes and many have those minarets, those tall, thin towers, but they don't have to. If you notice in the picture to the bottom on your left, it is a picture of the inside of a mosque. When you go inside a church, you're going to see, other than the altar and the cross, you're going to see rows and rows of chairs, pews, basically. Whereas inside a mosque, because I showed you the way we worship, chairs would just get in the way. And so we just have a big empty hall with carpeting. And sometimes, like I said, there will be a few chairs here and there for those who need them. But in general, it's just going to be a big, large hall with carpeting so people can just line up and pray behind each other. And here is a picture of women and during their prayer. You can see that they're lined up in rows. Now, if you have any questions, again, please feel free to ask during this presentation, and you don't have to wait until after I'm done. A question on? Okay, I have to bring that up. I'm sorry, I have a question at the bottom of my screen that I need to read. I apologize. How much time do 5 prayers require each day? Amazingly enough, that depends on the person. If I'm conducting my prayer by myself, it takes me maybe 2 or 3 minutes. What I didn't cover was a ritual cleansing that Muslims conduct before they pray. It's called wudu in Arabic. It starts off with the intention to cleanse oneself, and then one washes one's hands, rinses the mouth, rinses the nose, splash water on the face, wipe down your hair and ears, also clean your arms up to the elbows and feet. I did that in the wrong order, but That's what's covered, and each one of them is repeated 3 times, mostly because they didn't have running water at the time. So you needed to make sure that it was done multiple times, not just once. Now we have running water. We still continue to do the 3, but hopefully not with gushing, tons of water being wasted. So once we've done that, that takes anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 minutes. And then one would conduct the prayer. The prayer itself, for myself, the shorter prayers last about 2-3 minutes, and the longer prayers last about 4 minutes or so. Beyond the required prayer, we do add in some extra or bonus prayers which would add to that time, but generally one would allow anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes for one daily prayer. The nighttime prayer tends to be a little longer, so we would end up, maybe 5-10 minutes. Some people may take longer. Now, what extends the time is people who recite longer passages from the Quran. That could make the prayer go for a longer time. And then, of course, it's beyond that. But in general, anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. Thank you for your question. Any other questions? You will notice that I do not wear a headscarf, but during my 5 daily prayer, I will put on a headscarf to pray. Because that is, a part of the requirement for the way I pray, to be, to have my hair covered and be in modest clothing. Actually, be in modest clothing throughout my life, but especially at time of prayer, I will definitely cover my head. Now, what I do want to cover is going into Ramadan. We have our month of fasting that's going to begin this Friday, and it will be a little bit different for Muslims. So yes, we're going to conduct our 5 daily prayer at home, but Ramadan in general for Muslims is very much a time for community. People tend to mix with and break fast together, go and conduct extra prayers at the mosque in congregation, spend time with others. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen this Ramadan. So, although that's not going to happen and in a communal level, it will still be conducted at home. So Ramadan will still be observed at home. And during this time, we also will give zakat, which is another pillar of Islam. Zakat is a required donation that Muslims who are wealthy are required to give to those in need once a year based on their wealth. Please could we change to, or you already have. So now with zakat, uh, this calculation that I'm giving you right now, the 2.5% of their extra wealth is more of an urban calculation, right? Something that people living in cities and stuff. If one is a farmer, the calculation is different. But either way, Muslims choose this once a year for their zakat to be given in Ramadan because it's a reminder for them. That time kind of sticks out in their mind, so they do that. But obviously, one's not obligated to just give zakat during Ramadan. One can give it throughout the year, but Ramadan is the time when most people choose to give um, their zakat. This is required again for people of wealth. So if I happen to be a person who cannot make ends meet, where I can barely even feed my own family, I am not one of those people who has wealth, who's able to give to others. So I take care of my family first, and when anything extra that I have, I then take care of others. Next slide, please. Oh, I do have another question. That's nice. Hold on just one second here. I apologize. The question is, what does observing these 5 daily prayers do for you? Oh, that's a wonderful question. Thank you so much. Going back to those 5 daily prayers, I personally feel that these 5 daily prayers are for me. they're not for God. He's, for Muslims, they don't believe that God needs them to pray to him. This is more of a need that I have as a human being, that I need to feel and remember God's presence, and thereby uh, reach out to him 5 times a day, start my day off with the prayer, so that I have started, hopefully, a day um, aiming in the right direction. Halfway through my morning, when it's time for lunch, I stop. And, sometimes we get very, very involved in all our worldly affairs. And for me, this is just a reminder that, there is something above me, there is God, and I'm answerable. Halfway through my afternoon, the same deal. I get very busy getting involved with other people. And these reminders, these 5 daily prayers to me are constant reminders of God being, and Muslims believe that God is as close as their jugular vein, that he's right here with us. And these 5 daily prayers to me are a reminder. And then at sunset, when my whole family's at home, right around dinner time, that's also a wonderful time to remember and thank God. And then again at bedtime as a reminder. So for me personally, these are my ways of connecting with my creator, as well as a reminder throughout the day that I have God along with me on this journey that I call life. Hopefully that answered your question. Thank you. Um, And if you have questions, please feel free to keep asking. I will continue, and unless I have a question to answer. It looks like we have another question. Do you set a timer so you don't miss a prayer? What a wonderful question. Thank you so much, Donna. Actually, amazingly enough, it used to be different depending on where you were in the world. If one lived in a country that was, had a predominantly Muslim population, one would hear the call to prayer coming from these mosques all around on every corner. Nowadays, yes, we still have that, but every one of us has this lovely thing called a smartphone. And there are so many prayer apps, Muslim prayer apps, that are available for free, and one can then set the city you're in, the time of year, date and time, and automatically it'll basically populate with all the information that's needed. And one can have silent 5 alarms that are set in there, or they can be with the call to prayer that's called the adhan. Um, and or you can just have a little beeper. So everybody has it differently. It's actually quite fun when we are in a group of people at a party, people's phones are off by a split second. And so one phone goes off with a call to prayer, and literally a few seconds later, another one goes off, and you see all these people kind of fidgeting with this thing to turn the volume down a little bit. And some of them sit there going, "No, I'll let everybody know it's time to pray." So it's very interesting having all these calls to prayer. But nowadays with smartphones, yes. Some of us, while we're growing up, were taught how to tell the time of day for prayer by looking at the sun and the shadows, the length of the shadows. So one can still do that if one doesn't have a smartphone, or any other way. And there are mosques that will publish, monthly timetables of the time to pray. So that was a wonderful question. Thank you. I get the feeling I have yet another question. Let me just make sure. Does your phone also show you which way to face for Makkah? Actually, amazingly enough, yes. Most of them now come equipped with a compass type application in them, so people can mostly, depending on where they are, especially during travel, be able to use their phone as a compass. And again, it would take me a few seconds to bring this up to show you, but let me try if I can. In the meantime, many times, most cities have, actually, if it's not cloudy and stuff, one can pretty much tell. Oh, I've got one of those, what do you call those ads going on over here. But anyway, once it comes up, I'll show it to you. So the direction to prayer can be found using these apps. Here we go. if you can see very close, here's it's a little map, a compass, I'm sorry. And depending on which city you're in, you kind of lay it flat and then it just adjusts itself. Here in the room I'm in, it's going to point me in that direction. So hopefully that was useful. Thank you. All right, if I'm going to keep talking about how Ramadan's going to be a little different, but if you have questions on Salat or even Ramadan, I'm happy to answer. Next slide, please, on fasting. A lot of people hear about Ramadan in that you hear about the fasting that Muslims observe during this time. Um, Yes, fasting is a very, very important part of Ramadan, especially for healthy adults. But very young children who haven't come of age and elderly people who are weak are probably not going to be able to fast from food, but they will engage in all of the other rituals and worship and prayer that one conducts during this time. During the month of Ramadan, Muslims, um, try very hard to use this month as a springboard for good habits of not just prayer and eating, but also on reflecting on oneself and bettering oneself. Um, so that is going to be a little different this year, only in that community will be at arm's length or a Skype thing away, or any kind of learning that one did, going to the mosque and spending time with people and praying together and reading Quran together. Um, those are all things that are going to be done in the home with one's family or sometimes just by yourself. If somebody is isolated and alone at home, they're going to be doing this by themselves, which will be a little different. Next slide, please. During this time, the Quran is very, very important to Muslims too, because Muslims believe that the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad for the very first time during the month of Ramadan. And so Muslims make a point of coming to and reciting the Quran almost on a daily basis. They try to complete a full recitation of the Quran by themselves at home during those 30 days. Some will bring up the Quran and study it with translation and explanations and try to come closer to it. And the one thing that as a community people usually do during Ramadan, and many do, is a prayer called Taraweeh prayer. Taraweeh prayer is conducted at night after the nighttime prayer, usually in congregation at the mosque for all 29 to 30 days of the month of Ramadan. And what ends up happening is they will have a person leading the prayer who will then go through um, a 30th of the Quran a night almost, reciting it through those prayers. Um, and that feeling of coming to the Quran and spending time with community, that is something that is going to change. It's going to be very different this year. There are many, many mosques all over, not just America, but all over the world, and many imams and scholars who are providing a lot of this educational plus Quran and spiritual guidance online via all of the different apps that are available. But they are trying, to provide those. I got a message this morning from our local mosque in Scottsdale saying all of the different programming they're going to provide. I know Tempe provided that on their website. So all of these mosques are trying to provide that for people who are going to stay home and who won't be able to go there. Um, and so that's pretty much my presentation today. We will, going forward, be taking a break from our social distance learning series during the month of Ramadan so that everybody is able to concentrate on their prayer and worship at this time. But we will try and pick it up. We will pick it up after Ramadan. We're going to have a whole new set of topics for you. We will not be doing them twice a week. We may end up doing them just about once a week or once every 2 weeks. We'll let you know and we'll put the schedule up for you. But if this time, 11 a.m., was a little challenging for you and you would prefer a different time, say late afternoon or early evenings, please message us in the comments below so we can at least take your input, in part of our scheduling and a consideration for that. So thank you. Another um, announcement I would like to make is for those of you who've been attending our ILM circles, our monthly workshops. um, Noticed that in March we were unable to conduct one. It was moved to April. It will now be completely online, live, like this program was. Um, the topic is progressive Christianity. Reverend Al Gephardt will be the one leading that discussion. It is next Tuesday, April 28th, 1 week from today. It starts at 6 p.m. on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. So I really look forward to, having you attend that with us. So if you have any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I will go ahead and close off for today. And I wish everybody a happy Ramadan who is celebrating. And thank you all for joining us every week. Hopefully, this was as enjoyable for you as it's been for us at ISBA.